Do you think you can get rich in just one day? I don't think so either. And you know who else agrees with me? Tae Kim, the financial tortoise. I am so excited to be joined by him today. We're going to be talking about how to build your wealth slowly. Get it, tortoise? I can't wait for you to hear more about Tae's journey and how you can slowly follow in his footsteps to become a quiet millionaire. Tae Kim, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Mindy.
Take us back to the beginning of your financial journey. What was your breaking point to start examining your finances more in depth?
Yeah, definitely. So the financial wake-up point for my wife and I was actually right after we got married. Up until that point, I wasn't really good at managing my finances. So, I made all the mistakes in my 20s, getting into credit card debt straight out of college because no one taught me how to manage credit card debt or how to use a credit card. Bought a brand new car, bought a rent-to-own furniture. I thought it was a great deal. I walked into a furniture store and they're like, hey, you can have all of this, and the monthly payment is only $50 a month, not letting me know that I'll be paying that for the next 3 years. So I made all these, in essence, dumb money mistakes. And I think for me, as long as I had money in the bank account to fund my lifestyle, I thought I was doing well with my finances. That was until my wife and I got married. And at the same time, I was finishing grad school. She was just finishing nursing school. So we spent all of our money that we had on a very lavish wedding. We spent about $45,000 on a wedding. And this was like 13 years ago. So we had nothing in our bank account. And we had student debt of about $105,000. Thankfully, we had jobs. So we were able to, still fund our lifestyle. But I think what scared me was we were just one step away from financial catastrophe where, we couldn't, if one of us lost our jobs, that would affect our lifestyle. We couldn't, pay our mortgage. We would, have a challenging time paying back just all the obligations that we had at the time. And for me, I think that was a wake-up moment. I was like, whoa, this is scary. I thought I was doing well, but apparently I don't know how to manage money that well.
And how much were you making at the time, you and your wife combined?
Both of us, I graduated from business school. My wife graduated from nursing school. So I would say between 150 to 200. I think maybe closer to 200 at the time. So good income. I'm not complaining about the income.
Well, I think it's interesting that you're making this much money. That's good income. That's great income. And you are simultaneously making great income and also one step away from catastrophe. I like the way you phrase that. That is quite shocking for somebody who may not be in the great income earner. They're like, well, of course, how could you, or not of course, how could you be one step away from catastrophe when you make so much money? You can be paycheck to paycheck no matter how much your paycheck is. If you're spending every single thing that's coming in and you're not saving anything and you're waiting for the next paycheck to come, that's paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's paycheck to paycheck. The concept doesn't matter. It's income irrelevant, right? You can be making $1 million a year. You could be paycheck to paycheck. You can be making $20,000 a year. You could be paycheck to paycheck.
And one step away from catastrophe in both situations. So how did you go from one step away from catastrophe to financial independence? How did you discover the concept of financial independence?
Yeah, to get to financial independence, I think it took us a little while. I would say, there's stages to, our financial, growth. You first have to kind of get yourself out of the quicksand before you can kind of see the concept of financial independence making sense in your head. So for us, our immediate goal was to pay down our student debt and just to be able to get into a stronger financial position. So thankfully, my wife and I were introduced to Dave Ramsey, and then we went to a Dave Ramsey conference. We went through the Financial Peace University. And then after going through all of that, we were able to pay down our student debt in about 3.5 years. And, we paid off all of our other obligations. We had, car payments at the time, and we were able to save up an emergency fund, all those things that we didn't have before. So I think after we paid off our student debt, we were, at a point saving half of our income at the time. And that's what helped us to, get to a really stronger financial position. But I think after we got to a stronger financial position, you kind of need objective goals to drive you and to motivate you. After we paid off our student debt, after we had our emergency fund, after we, had our spending under control, for a little bit, I felt a little bit lost about what our next financial goal is going to be. And I think at that time, I was also introduced to Choose FI, the podcast, where I learned about this concept called financial independence, where, you read about like Mr. Money Mustache and hear crazy stories about people who didn't just get out of debt and got themselves into a financial position. They like supercharged it and then went to like retirement. And I thought that was like a crazy concept at the time. I'm like, how is that even possible? So I think but then more and more I listened to it, that I think also kind of that excited me, and that also gave me another concrete goal to aim at. Financial independence, I think, really didn't click in my brain until I think we were at a position where we could even dream about it. I think that's the thing, right? Like people can tell you about these crazy concepts, but until you can somewhat see yourself, it being a reality, it just goes over your head.
So how did you start implementing your newfound financial information and your new FI goal?
I think what the financial independence community, all of these resources really helped was put a framework around how you can achieve financial independence. So, like saving and investing 25 times your expenses. The idea of retirement is a bit subjective until you can put some objective numbers around it. So then these frameworks help my wife and I to be like, oh, okay, so we have this much saved up so far. If we were to do the math and save a little bit more and do that for the next 10 years, we can reach this financial independence goal. And then based upon this framework, we would be financially independent. So that was, I think, very reassuring.
Okay, so you're already saving 50% of your income. You've had the conversation with your wife. What were some of the steps that you took to start implementing this? Did you cut things out? Did you start earning more income?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So both my wife and I, we're very conservative, and we don't have these crazy like ideas to do crazy things. So we were in very traditional jobs. I was a finance director for a company, so did very boring stuff, FP&A. My wife was a registered nurse. She worked in the neonatal ICU, and for us, we were thankful that we were in good occupations where we had good salaries, and we saw that if we stuck with this pathway, our income, it wouldn't increase dramatically, but it was incrementally increasing. So we kind of had a pathway of like, okay, this is how much money we can make, and then we also focus on the expense side. What are some of the things that we can tighten up? Maybe we can't cut down housing too much because, we're locked into a mortgage. However, we don't need to upgrade our cars, or we can tighten up our food expenses. We can, instead of eating out every time we go to work, we can pack our lunches. So those are things that, once we had a concrete goal and once we had a good idea of where our income was, we can try to dial up the income here and there with my wife sometimes working overtime, or we can try to dial down the expenses. But I think the overall framework at the time was really, hey, we're in this great position where we have good income. Let's try to, the image I have us during that time was literally with a shovel. We're trying to shovel as much as we can into all of our, tax advantage accounts, our retirement account, into our brokerage account, juice out as much as possible from our income, in order that we can take a step closer to that, into that financial independence goal.
So you just said, we're very conservative. My wife and I don't do crazy things. Yeah, you do. Financial independence is this big crazy thing, except it isn't. It isn't this big crazy thing because you are setting yourself up to have enough money so you don't have to work anymore. I would argue that maybe working 40 hours a week until you're 65 is the crazy thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, if you were to reframe it in that way. I guess we were a lot more adventurous than we give ourselves credit for.
Tae, let's talk about what you're investing in. You alluded to stockpiling money into investments, after-tax investments, 401ks, et cetera. And that is the way that you get to financial independence. You're not going to get there simply by your income. You have to put it into the stock market or real estate or whatever and invest. So where is the financial tortoise putting his money?
Yeah, the simple answer is in Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund, also known as VTSAX. That is my favorite fund. However, there is also a lot of people's favorite funds. So, the thought regarding, I guess the slow and steady path to building wealth through the stock market is to invest in a low-cost, broad market index funds, because trying to beat the stock market is not only costly from a financial perspective, it's also, studies have shown that statistically it's very, very hard to do. So then for me, given that, I don't look at stocks as a full-time, I'm not a trader, my general thought was that my effort would be best spent on trying to make more money and try to put more money into the market, into a low-cost broad market index fund, than trying to beat the market. And then invest as much as possible and then hold on to it as long as possible.
That, I want to underline that, highlight it, circle around it, put little arrows all over the place. You are not going to beat the stock market. And if you do, it's a fluke. You ran into a bunch of luck and you're not going to do it again. Let's talk about leaving your job. You don't work there anymore, right?
I do not. So I left my day job as a finance director about 3 years ago, and had a bit of a midlife crisis when I was 39 years old. At the same time, when I was getting very interested in financial independence, and decided to try my luck in being a middle-aged social media influencer on YouTube. So I am today a full-time personal finance YouTuber.
Did you quit your job because you hit your FI number, or because you wanted to do this content creation?
No, so it was interesting. Initially, when my wife and I got interested in the idea of financial independence, there's a lot of different pathways to take. Our, initial thought was, okay, if we just grind away at our current pathway for another, 10 more years or 5 more years, if we really push it hard, then we would reach our financial independence number. However, like anything in life, you get to a certain crossroad. This is the original goal, and then you get to a certain crossroad, and I realized that my desires had changed. So right around 3 years ago, I've been in my job for about 10 years. And I think one of the memorable moments I had was I was sitting in a board meeting, and we will present our quarterly numbers every quarter, and then I'll be there with my CFO, and it was my responsibility and my team's responsibility to put together the slide deck for our board members about the financial forecast. Very boring stuff. And then I noticed, my CFO would be just a seat over, and then I would, slide the slides over to her as she would be presenting, and she would have some questions. I would chime in. And I saw kind of 10 years down the road, I'm like, oh my goodness, if I stay in this pathway, 10 years from now, I'm just going to be moving a seat over. And instead of me, making the slides, I'm just presenting the slides. And I think for me, when I saw exactly where my path was going to be for the next 10 years, even though financially, yes, my income would have gone up, I would have hit my, I went to graduate school for my MBA. So that was the goal. I wanted to be a CFO in a company. But then I realized personally, is that still what I want? What else do I want to do with my life? And I think that was a kind of a pivot point where I started to question for myself, what is it that I want? What are some of the things that I want to try? I could see exactly where my life is going to head if I go down this pathway. So I think I gave myself the permission to ask those questions. And it wasn't overnight. I mean, it took several years, but I think that's where I kind of landed at, why don't I try becoming a middle-aged YouTuber? I'm not too old for this stuff, So I think, thankfully, so then the pursuit of financial independence, I think really helped us to get into a strong financial position where we could make calculated, risky moves like this in a way, where it was okay for me to leave my day job and then try my luck at being a YouTuber full-time. So by the time, when my wife and I, we started kind of talking about, what do we want to do? What do we want to try? We saved up about 2 years worth of cash in our bank account in order to prepare for that. So by the time I left my day job, that was one of the things that like I was trying to reassure my wife, saying, hey, if I make zero money from YouTube for the next 2 years, we're still okay. It's not going to affect us. And even then, we still have all of these other levers that we can pull. We have our brokerage account. We have our other investment accounts. Or worst case scenario, I can go back to my old job.
Was it difficult to get your wife on board? And I ask this because that's one of the biggest questions that I get outside of, what are you going to do for healthcare? How do you get your spouse on board? It sounds like she was involved from the beginning of when you found financial independence. Would that be a correct way to characterize that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, like any good partnership, like marriage, I think it requires just ongoing conversation because I can't just drop on her lap, this is what I want to do. I think we were involved in each other's conversations as regards to these are stuff that I'm thinking about. These are, like how I was feeling in my day job. What are some of the things that we want, our goals and dreams? Like, what are some of the things that we never thought we could try? But is that really a mental mindset, or is that physically we can't do that? I can think that I want to be a hip hop dancer, but like it's not going to happen. I just biologically I wasn't made for that. But there's other things that maybe, hey, like that's more of a limiting belief rather than reality. So those are stuff that we had a lot of conversations, I think, around that. And I think finances also was a huge part of that. So we talked about like, okay, if this is what you want to do, where both of us would we want to be financially to feel comfortable to make this move? And then that would mitigate some of the concerns that both of us had emotionally. So
I am going to say you should follow your dreams, and I don't allow these limiting beliefs. And I want to see you make a hip hop video, please.
You're right. It is a limiting belief. If I believe in it, I can do it.
What would you say your biggest takeaway is from pursuing financial independence?
Biggest takeaway from pursuing financial independence, I think there is... One is hard. Let me break it into two subparts. I think the framework of financial independence, I think, is really helpful. I think the 25 times, expenses that enables us to, be financially independent of our day job, of our income. I think that was very helpful. But I think the other part is that framework also helped us to dream about what are the possibilities, because that took the finances. It wasn't a subjective kind of like, can we make it work? Here's a framework that you can follow. And, you can tell yourself, are you a quarter of the way there, halfway there, or are you fully there? And then I think that, that more of a objective data helps us to dream about what is possible within our life. And I think that, is that's where I think we spend probably more, I would say if my wife and I in our conversations, we spend 20% more on the numbers and then probably 80% upon like, what are the things that we want to do? And is that possible?
Oh my God, yes. Yes, yes, yes. I hear from so many people who are like, oh, I don't want to pursue financial independence because I'll be bored. Really? You'll be bored? Start making a list of the things you want to do, but you don't have time to do it. Thank you for your time today. It's always really good to talk to you. If somebody doesn't know where to find you online, where would I send them?
Yeah, so you can find me on YouTube. I have been able to successfully find, my little niche in the YouTube world as a middle-aged personal finance YouTuber. So it's called Financial Tortoise, Tae Kim Financial Tortoise. So I talk about all things money, investing, slow and steady path to wealth, stuff that, men in their 40s, new things that we realize about ourselves. Those are stuff I talk about. So if you find those things interesting, please come check me out on YouTube.
Yes, please check him out on YouTube. He has a ton of videos, and you can, even if you're not a 40-year-old man, you can find multiple videos that will teach you something and you will enjoy. All right, Tae, thank you so much for your time. And thank you, my dear viewers, for watching. If you like this video, please click the thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more inspiring fire stories just like Tae's. This is Mitty Jensen signing off.